Glenn McGillivray is the Managing Director for the Institute for Catastrophic Loss Reduction. Mr. McGillivray, what are the main factors contributing to this dramatic surge in cost?
Well, a lot of people like to point to things like climate change and the poor state of public infrastructure, things of that nature, and certainly those are critical factors. But the main driver is the simple fact that we have more people and property in risky places.
What role does extreme weather play?
It plays a big role, huge role, as a matter of fact. If we look at things like earthquakes, you don't get spikiness with earthquakes. We get pretty much the same number year after year. But when you look at events involving climate and or weather, they're growing quite dramatically, and particularly events involving water, wind, and wind-driven water. But water itself has actually surpassed fire as the main driver of property loss in Canada. So it's a big factor. Weather is really causing a large number of big losses.
Are you surprised at how quickly those losses are going up?
Partly, yes. I mean, if you look at here in Canada, prior to about 2009, Canada got its share of losses. We got the odd large loss, but from about 2009 forward, we're seeing a big increase in large insured losses. And I'm not saying it's all climate change. There are other factors in there. But the costs are going up dramatically, and it's not a nice, even upward growth trend. It's pretty dramatic.
When it comes to climate change, how does the economic impact vary between high-income and low-income countries?
It varies greatly, and it's kind of a sad story when you look at it. When you get a natural disaster in a developing country, what we used to call the third world, it largely costs lives, and we see sometimes really big loss numbers. I'm thinking to the recent tsunami in Indonesia, the Boxing Day tsunami a few years ago. Some of those losses are huge. But when you get losses in the developed world, the industrialized Western world, they tend to cost money but few lives. So we're doing a pretty good job in industrialized countries at protecting people, but we're doing a pretty lousy job at protecting property and reducing the impact on economies and things like that.
What do you hope policymakers take away from this report?
Well, there are a few things. First of all, the cost of inaction is much greater than the cost of action. There are some that argue out there that the things that need to be done are too expensive, too costly. But if we continue to put them off, they're going to rise in cost almost exponentially in the decades ahead. I like to say that the climate change we're experiencing now is climate change on training wheels. We ain't seen nothing yet, and we got to get going on it right now. Secondly, we have to look at things like land use planning and building code, for example, to start becoming more resilient and making our communities more hardened to the severe weather we're experiencing now and will get into the future.
What are the prospects that the policymakers are paying attention to this?
There are plenty of examples, and we note many of them in our book series, that there are communities that are doing a fair bit. A lot of money is going into stormwater management in Canada, for example, flood management. So there are plenty of examples of things that are being done on a local level. We're very encouraged that the federal government has finally gotten back into the flood risk management business. They were out of that business for a couple of decades, and they're getting back into it. So they're helping local governments pay for flood mapping. They're helping local governments pay for flood infrastructure and that sort of thing. So those are all good news stories. The federal government also recently invested $2 billion in the mitigation of natural disasters, which is also good news. But there's a long road ahead and a lot of work to be done going forward. And the thing is, we really know what needs to be done. There's been a lot of work into this area. We just have to do it, and we need the political will to get us going.
What things would you like to see done next?
Well, I think, first of all, I would like to see us stop constructing communities in high-risk areas. So, as the saying goes, when you find yourself in a hole, first thing you do is stop digging. We got to stop digging. So that means a halt to any new construction on immediate floodplains, coastal areas, and other at-risk areas. And then we have to, I think, take a look at existing high-risk communities and think about things like mandatory buyouts, where people are given market value for their properties and the land is converted into green space. We do that on the flood side. It's been done most successfully in Toronto after Hurricane Hazel in 1954. But it was just done actually in the Cape Breton Regional Municipality where 18, I think, high-risk homes were purchased and bulldozed. We need to see more of that. And then we need to see, I think, our building code ramped up a little bit. So we do have good building codes in Canada. We do build pretty good new homes, but there are gaps, and we've identified many of them. And for very little additional cost to a new home, we can keep a roof on in a tornado. We can put in devices that protect basements from flooding and rainstorms, that sort of thing. Not very costly when you're looking at a new build, and very easy to do when it's a new build. So we got to improve our building code a little bit there as well. And then it's really critical that we educate private property owners, homeowners, that they play a role in all of this. And it's not enough to sit back for them, to sit back and not do anything and perhaps blame damage on government. They have to play a role as well. And so getting people to understand that their properties may be at risk, their lives may be at risk, and to take action to do something about it.
Thank you very much for this.